All right. So, hi everyone. Welcome to our Colleges with Support Services panel. I'm Trisha Bresnahan, and I'm one of the co-chairs of Darien SEPAC, Darien Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. Uh, Darien Library and Darien Public Schools are co-sponsoring with us this evening. We'd like to thank Darien Library for running our webinar tonight, especially Samantha Cardone, who has taken a lot of time out to help organize this event and assist us with the technology. And she's even on her first day back from vacation, so we really thank her. And thank you to Cathy Ostar, Director of Counseling for Darien High School and Middlesex Middle School, for moderating our panel tonight. And thank you so much to our college reps for taking the time to be a part of our panel. They'll introduce themselves and their programs in just a minute. And then after that, Cathy will ask the panelists some questions about their schools and their supports. In the last 20 minutes of the presentation, we'll go to audience questions. You can submit those at any time through the Q&A feature. They will only be seen by the panelists. But please, and you can ask as many questions as you want. Please refrain from naming students or teachers or anyone to maintain privacy. And also Darien Library will be taping this evening's presentation, and we'll send that out in a CPAC blast when it's ready, or it'll also be on our website. So if you're not on the CPAC blast, you can email us at dariencpac@gmail.com. Also, we always love to hear if you have any questions or if you have ideas for future presentations or any feedback, we would love to hear from you. And we're also always looking for volunteers. Because the more the merrier. So feel free to email us with that. And so now here is Cathy Ostar, our Darien Director of Counseling. Thank you.
Thank you, Trisha. As Trisha said, my name is Cathy Ostar. I'm the Director of Counseling in Darien, working with the school counselors, students, staff, and families at Middlesex Middle School and Darien High School. I'm excited to be here tonight for some very important information about colleges with support services. And again, just to thank Darien SEPAC for organizing this event and inviting me to be a part of it. Samantha and the Darien Library, who's providing our Zoom and tech support, and my colleagues at Darien Public Schools. So thank you for sponsoring this event. Most colleges have student support service offices to help students who have had a 504 or an IEP in high school. But tonight, we are so very fortunate to have representatives from 4 different colleges and universities with strong student support services. They'll share details about their schools and their programs, specifically the academic, social, and living supports they provide. Like you, I'm looking forward to their insight and their advice for helping us understand eligibility and testing requirements to access accommodations in college, typical accommodations in college, and how and when to tell a college about your child's specific needs. We're also looking for questions from you, so you can add them in the Q&A part. All right, so we have a full agenda. Let's get started. So I first would like to introduce the panelists. We have Dan Darkow he's the director of the Miller Center for Student Disability Services at Miami University in Ohio. Kat Adler, the assistant director of the Center for Disability Services at the College of Charleston. Denicia Palmer, the Director of Accessibility Services at Iona University, and Anna Fierro, the Access Consultant in the Disabilities Resource Center at the University of Arizona. So thanks again for being with us tonight. Shall we start with each of you giving us a bit of an overview about your school and your program?
Thanks, Cathy. Good evening, everyone, and thanks again for the invitation to be here with you all tonight. Here at Miami, we are located in Oxford, Ohio, so we are in a rural location, but we have a fantastic a university, if you're looking for the quintessential college experience, that is Miami. If you ever have a chance to tour Miami, it is a beautiful landscape, brick buildings in a college town. We have approximately on campus between 18 and 20,000 students, and pride ourselves on the ability to create an individualized student experience at an institution that is of mid-size. Specifically about my office in our disability services, we work with approximately 17% of our Oxford student population. So our team is working with anywhere between 31 and 3,300 students within the university setting. We do have a few regional campuses that we're working with as well for students that would like to start on a Miami regional campus. On our team, we have myself as a director, an assistant director, and 5 access coordinators. So students that are engaging in requesting accommodations and affiliating with disability services would be matched with an access coordinator through the affiliation process to help guide them through connecting with our team and working through creating an individualized access plan. Outside of the accommodation process, we work and partner with our students in a variety of individualized supports, making sure they're connected across the university system and really creating those partnerships with other university offices because disability services cannot be every support service across campus. We do need to encourage our students to seek out the supports that they need, whether that's going to be academic support, counseling, health services, writing support, the list goes on and on. So we are navigators of access and connecting students to other academic supports that the university may provide, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. Lastly, I'll just mention that our team is highly committed to disability as a form of identity and a larger community of culture. So one in which that we do have a disability cultural space on our campus for students to coalesce around a shared identity, have a sense of community, and we do quite a bit of culture programming across our campus as well. So if your students are looking for that type of community on campus, Miami is a place for them, and we celebrate disability on our campus. So thanks again. Looking forward to the conversation.
Kat?
I am Kat Edler. I am the Assistant Director at the College of Charleston in the Center for Disability Services. We are considered a small campus, and some people describe us as a public university that acts like it's private. We are in downtown Charleston, so we are kind of locked in within our boundaries. But it is a very beautiful campus. If you've ever had the opportunity to visit Charleston and come to the College of Charleston, it is a gorgeous campus. A lot of uneven streets, though. We are, like I said, a smaller college. We have between 10 and 11,000 students in our office. We have affiliated with us about 16 or 1,700 students. And so we really look at how we can help students who have been identified with disabilities to access their educational curriculum. We provide support in that. As Dan said, we look at making connections with other campus offices because we can't do it all. One of the things that I tell parents when they come visit in these pre-visits prior to applying to college is, your student, you need to start letting your student be the driver, because they are going to be the driver when they get to college. You're not going to be here, and teachers aren't going to say, oh, I know what's in your IEP. They're going to have to request some of those things. And so I try and work on that front end with transition into our college. We have 3 Center for Disability Services administrators. We have the director, the assistant director, and we have an access specialist. And then we have a service coordinator and an administrative assistant who work in our office. So we're a fairly small office, but we are powerful. We get a lot done. We just monitored, I don't know how many exams we just finished yesterday. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell about the college.
Thanks, Kat. Denicia?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. Iona University, I'm the director of student access at Iona. I'm also the director for the Comprehensive Support Program, which is a small specialized program for students who need additional support. It's a fee-based program. The university is small, it's mid-sized. We have approximately 4,000 students on campus, but we are also very supportive of students. We have a neurodiversity club at Iona. We also have, aside from the accessibility services office, we also have the Office of Student Success. And oftentimes students start there with an issue and it comes to our office if a student is not quite sure whether or not they need accommodation. So that's oftentimes a place to start. We also offer workshops throughout the summer for incoming students and their families so that they understand the process. And we're there at orientation, open houses. We also offer testing accommodations, of course, and all the tools that students need in order to be successful. And one of the things we do recognize is that it's not easy for parents and students to know what that looks like. Because the high school environment is so very different from the university setting. And so we want to make sure that families know that we not only support students with learning disabilities, but also those with chronic medical condition that might spike at any time. There are also those with mental health concerns. So we really try to have parents think outside of the limits of the IEP, but to think about other things that might impact a student with disabilities, and in fact, help them to understand what a disability is, what the law covers. And this really helps them the wheels to start spinning, to think and anticipate what those needs might be. So when we do our one-on-one sessions with students and their families, we're oftentimes just trying to troubleshoot and think of the possibilities. So I'm really excited to be here this evening. And of course, for the comprehensive support program, there's a different process for that. Very similar, all the supports that are offered through ASO are also offered through for the CAP program, but it's slightly more elevated in that regard.
Thank you. Anna?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ana Fierro. I'm the lead access consultant at the University of Arizona for first-year students. We are a large university located in southern Arizona in the city of Tucson. We have about 60,000 undergraduate students. Last year, we had an incoming class of 9,000 students, and our office has about 4,300 students affiliated with DRC. DRC here at the University of Arizona has existed prior to the ADA, so we've been on campus for more than 50 years. We like to ensure that everyone, not just our students, but staff, faculty, and visitors have a welcoming and accessible experience. So I'm happy to and look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you all. I know, Denisha, you touched a little bit on a smaller program that's a fee-based program, but generally speaking, is there an application, like a separate application or a fee that's affiliated with students getting services through your departments or offices on your campuses?
For accessibility services office, there's no fee. And I think that's across the board for most universities. For the comprehensive assistance program, yes, there is a fee, and that's because the support includes coaching and transition support. So it's much different. It's much more comprehensive. We're looking at the whole student, and we're offering ongoing support, including registration assistance with connecting to other resources on campus. And faculty might reach out to us if a student is struggling, and we liaise with the faculty on behalf of the student. So that's usually the students apply. We usually require more documentation. That is similar, but not as much as for the accessibility services. And we meet the students and have conversations with them before they're admitted to the program. And there's also a summer transition program that's attached to that as well.
Very cool. I would just like to add that I think across the board, as Denisha shared, so disability services is a federal legislation that articulates under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Accommodations are required to be provided. So that is across the board at public and private institutions. Some of the titles may shift a little bit, but regardless, reasonable accommodations must be provided. So that's kind of the first thing that I would say in terms of what is fee-based. And then there are then, tier 1, tier 2, higher tiers of support that different universities may offer that do have those additional fees attached, as was previously described. But from a purely disability accommodation standpoint, there should not be a fee.
We don't have a fee, but there is an application process. So students have to seek the information, which is very readily available on our website. We do get a lot of phone calls about how to go about that, but there is an application process. It's not automatic, and students do need to self-identify. And I think we're going to talk more about what kinds of things we look for in just a few minutes, so I won't get into that right now.
Thank you. Yes, that's a great segue, Kat, into kind of the next category of questions I have, which is about the college application process and how it sort of intersects with students with disability services. So we tell we as a school counseling office at a high school tell students with IEPs and 504s to ask about programs and services at college to ensure that the different colleges and universities have resources that the students need to succeed. So what's the best way for them to get that information? I know, Kat, you mentioned your website, but if they're taking if they're on a college visit or visiting the campus, should they make an appointment with your office, or how can they get that information?
A lot of times with parents who are bringing their students, or students themselves reach out to us to make appointments. Sometimes within our schedules, it's not always easy to do that, but we can always meet via a Zoom meeting at an alternate time. We do have a lot of campus tours for prospective students, and we do see a lot of students that way. And there are a lot of questions coming out of that. And most of the tour guides who do those tours know about our office. And so if the question comes up, they can refer them to us if they don't already know about us. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The best way to get to us is through the website.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share the best way for students to get information about your program, or if you encourage them to reach out to you when they're on a visit or through a Zoom meeting?
So I know the admissions team, usually when they go travel to different schools, they talk about our accessibility services. And we also invite counselors to our campus sometimes, because we know you're the first touch points with students to talk about this. One of the things, as Kat mentioned, students have to register, right? That's the first thing. They have to register for accommodations. It's not as the same as in high school, but as Dan also touched on, it is the institution's legal obligation to provide those accommodations, right? So it's not that some schools have accommodations and others don't. The student is requesting what they need, and we are looking at what they qualify for. So we're looking to remove barriers associated with their disability, and that requires a conversation. We also look at the history of use of accommodations. We're looking at what courses they're taking and what they might need. For example, if they're taking lab courses, they might need, and they have wheelchairs, they might need access in the lab. So it varies, but typically it requires a conversation. It requires requests for accommodation, at least registering and sort of listing all the impairments they have, and also what they've received in the past. At least our office does that. Everyone may ask different questions. And then we're having a conversation. So we do encourage families to start early. Many parents do, especially if they know that their child has complex needs. We have students with sensory impairments where they're hearing impaired or they're sight impaired. Those students we really need to see very early to start thinking about what their needs are, because it is our responsibility to provide those devices for the students and to make sure the classrooms or the instructors are equipped with the devices that they need. So it can take several weeks. And so it would be really, it's a good idea to connect early with the Accessibility Services Office and start asking some questions. And we usually do need to see some documentation. Doesn't mean students have to run out and get tested, but the IEP does provide some information. But what I always say to families is that the IEP is derived from a previous test. So they were tested, they were evaluated in order to get to design the IEP. And we like to look at that test. That test provides more information for us than the IEP does. So we might send them back to you, Cathy, and say, you know, can we get a copy of our psych eval in addition to the IEP, so we have a more robust conversation.
I agree 100% with what Denisha said. That updated evaluation, even 3-5 years at the most, because their learning profile is going to be very different from when they were in middle school as they are coming out of high school. There's been a lot of changes. You expect some growth. If there hasn't been growth, then we need to see why that is within the evaluation so that we can better help design accommodations, because we may know of different things that we can try based on that learning profile that is within the psych evaluation. So parents, school, I was a K-12 special education administrator in the central office for 20 years. We didn't like to hear it when parents asked, I want an evaluation because I'm going to be, my 11th grade, we're looking at college, but you do have the right to ask for that, and you can do that if you need updated evaluations. They really need to have that good, solid information so that good programs can be designed. And also with transition, as Denisha said, and I said earlier, students are going to be the drivers. Mom and dad, you're not going to be there with them, and they need to be able to identify their barriers to us. When we get them in there and I ask the student, what are your barriers? And they say, well, I don't know. And then you really have to do a lot of questioning. But students being in IEP meetings, which I know that you all do in high school, and there's really good transition plans of what students' plans are post high school, are really going to be helpful once they get to college, because that really helps them to self-advocate for themselves.
Great, thank you.
I did want to add, for the University of Arizona, we have a large team of access consultants. We have access consultants that are on call. So if you did have a question and you wanted to give us a call or walk in person, there will always be someone available to answer general questions. You're also more than welcome to reach out via email. And we have a front desk as well, where student workers are and can answer also those general questions. But if it's something a little bit more specific, you're more than welcome to ask to meet with an access consultant.
Yeah, similar to Anna, we have students that stop by during that transition process, whether it be on campus for a visit or reach out via email. We offer general student consultation meetings that can be requested and scheduled online, that can be in person or virtual, and it just depends on what the student's needs are. We also have drop-in hours each day in the morning and afternoon available for students and families, and we have teams that are available during our Make It Miami events on campus for students to get connected with us. So lots of opportunities to meet with us. We do not put accommodations in place via a formal process until a student has committed to the university. So we can talk generally about what accommodations may look like, but we do require a student to be committed in order to move in our formal application process.
Yeah, we're the same as Dan. We might look at general accommodations or what may happen, but without actually reviewing that documentation, we couldn't possibly say, yes, this would happen. And you do have to commit prior to being able to apply.
Thank you for making those points. And I think, like Denisha said, you want to start early, but not before you've applied and been accepted, right? So you want to, we encourage students and families to do some research about, generally speaking, what are the services that are offered on all the campuses, and ask some specific questions, but they wouldn't connect with you with their documentation or with an application or reaching out asking for services until they've applied and been accepted and committed to the school. Thanks for clarifying that. So just again, for students who have a disability, would you suggest they disclose that during the admissions process, or is that something that they would share with you after they've applied?
Yeah, I can start off. It's a great question. It's largely not relevant to the admission process. We know lots of students choose to disclose that via personal narrative for in their application, in their admission essay, but it has no bearing on their admission to the university. We are in a completely separate process. Certainly, if the student needs to request accommodations for the application process, they can do so via our processes. But in most cases, these are online applications that students have access to. If they experience a barrier with the technology system, certainly we can assist with that. But from our perspective, there is no real connection between what we're able to provide and a student's admission to the university. Those are separate standards.
That is aim for our university, and I think it's even a legal process as well. So we wouldn't encourage families to disclose or not disclose, right? Because we have our comprehensive support program, families sometimes inquire about that through admissions, but it doesn't carry weight in terms of them being admitted to the university, because we wouldn't consider their application until they have been admitted to Iona. I just wanted to go back a little bit to reviewing a student's documentation prior to them committing to Iona. We are all comfortable doing that. We're comfortable looking at a student's IEP and sharing with them what accommodations would be offered at Iona or to that student, right? Because the accommodations are removing barriers. So for example, we could say, you had spelling waived in school. This would not be waived at the university level. And I think that's generally the case for most universities. So we would explain to them some of the accommodations that are typical for Iona and some that would not be accommodable at the post-secondary level. Sometimes they need a reader, right? They use the reader in high school. We use electronic devices to do the reading. We provide pens for them that would read. So we're able to sort of pull apart the IEP and check off the ones that are applicable to Iona or to the university setting, and then explain which ones aren't. So Iona does, for example, offer students a substitution for foreign language if they never attempted one in high school. But we do not have a math substitution. Every student has to take the intro math, right? So we would say to a parent, I would suggest that your child strengthen their math skills or talk about what the highest level math is that they're taking in high school, and they can look at what Iona offers as the entry level math for the core degree, right? For the core requirements. So there's some ways that we can have that conversation before they commit. But typically, we have a student who uses the cart service, and that really, the cost doesn't matter. As long as it's an accommodation that the student is entitled to, the university is entitled to provide that service. One of the common questions we have, though, which we do encourage families to look at, is the physical layout of the campus, right? So that would be very important for someone who uses a wheelchair, someone who has difficulty accessing stairs, because some of our buildings are older, right? But at the same time, we're able to move classes to accessible buildings and accessible floors. We do the same for the residence hall. But for parents to be comfortable, they might want to visit the campus just to see what the layout is like.
I hear you, Zanisha. Our campus, you know, we're a very old historic campus, and we have a lot of brick roads that are very uneven. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing to come visit prior to making a commitment to make sure that it is accessible. I mean, there are things that we can do, like move classes from upper floors to lower floors for regarding mobility, but we can't change the streets. And so, you know, just access to the campus itself might not be, yeah, you'll want to look at that prior to committing.
Thank you. Denisha, that was a great segue to the next section. Just before we move on to talk more about what are some common accommodations at the university level, I did just want to reiterate that students leaving Darien High School, they often have their summary of performance, which would include their testing and their IEP, and that's important documentation to hang on to once a student has applied and been accepted, so they can take that information to you in your offices. Okay, so I know Denisha mentioned a few things. We have a number of students who get extended time on tests and quizzes. I mean, that seems like that would be an accommodation that would be reasonable for the university level, but your point about no penalty for spelling or some of the other high school accommodations, they aren't appropriate in college. So can you talk a little bit about how students would, if someone does have extended time for assessments, does that go through your office? Do they need to self-advocate like we've talked about and speak with the professor? Or what are some of the other accommodations about maybe getting a copy of class notes, or like you mentioned, waiving the foreign language or substituting the foreign language requirement?
So I can start with that. So we do have a 4-semester foreign language requirement, and we do offer alternatives in certain cases. Not everyone who has a disability is eligible to receive a foreign language alternative. We look closely at maybe students who are deaf or hard of hearing, students with specific language-based learning disabilities. Possibly, yeah, a student who has a identified expressive or receptive speech language disability. Those are some things that we would consider, and so that's one of the reasons that it's really important for us to look at that recent testing, because that will tell us a lot of information. But as far as requesting accommodations, so it is an application process. You would meet with us, and I think most of the schools do this. We have what we call a welcome meeting, or an interactive meeting, where the student lets us know their barriers, and we design accommodations based on that. And as we've talked about, not all high school accommodations translate to college. You know, some students have note takers in high school, and we don't. I discourage note takers in college, because I tell people, if your note taker knows what the professor's talking about, but you don't, your note taker might not write it down. But so you won't ever know. So I encourage using some of the assistive technology. We have, you know, ability to record classes. We also have some assistive technology programs that we use. One of them is Glean, that will do a transcript, and they even have an AI notes thing that Glean does. So that's one that we will approve. Regarding professor notification letters, so after you've met with one of the disability services administrators, you would be issued a professor notification letter, and we encourage students to share that with their professors, because their professors don't know about it unless they have been given it, and to meet with them in office hours to see if they have any questions about what that accommodation is, how that accommodation is going to work. We want them to be on the same page with the accommodation, because not everybody who reads an accommodation is going to read it exactly how it might be in my mind when I have approved that accommodation. So, you know, we do often get questions from professors saying, how am I supposed to implement this? And we get those questions from students as well. But, you know, time and a half on a test, we tell students, you know, try not to back your classes back to back, because if you get time and a half for a test, then you want to be able to get to your next class. So we would have to find an alternate time for you to take that test if you've got a back-to-back class. But talk to your professor to see if they can monitor that time and a half, or if they want you to take it in the alternative testing site. And there's a process to sign up to do that as well. So there's a lot of new things that students are required to navigate when they get to the college level that accommodations in high school, you know, they haven't had to ask for those and really advocate and find out how those work, but they are expected to do that at the college level.
It's that self-advocacy again you were talking about. It's important.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anna.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to add how important it is for the student to engage in the interactive process. Shared documentation is helpful and that can provide us with some information, but having that conversation with the student is really helpful to really understand what barriers and challenges that they experience or anticipate in their courses. So we really encourage students to have an understanding, but even if they don't, you know, our access consultants are prepared to ask those follow-up questions. But yeah, just wanted to emphasize the importance of that interactive process with the students to understand their specific challenges.
And also to add, our process requires students to register, and once they're approved, their letters are sent electronically to their instructors. So they get to decide which accommodations they're going to use for which classes. So not all accommodations are necessary. As they move forward, they might decide they have a pick list based on their approved accommodations. We also try to be the intermediary between the student and the faculty. We might do a Zoom session to discuss the accommodation with the faculty, especially since we oftentimes have new faculty who might not be very knowledgeable. And as Kat mentioned, some can be resistant, and we don't want to put the students in the position of negotiating their accommodations. So that's even more reason why the students should get to know us very well, so that they're comfortable walking in. And the other issue that might come up for a freshman or a student transitioning from high school is that they encounter some new barriers that they might not think is accommodable, and it is, right? So we could have a faculty member who is heavy lecture based, doesn't write a lot of notes, doesn't do a lot of handouts, even though we have the electronic blackboard, and that student might struggle. The material and information might whiz by them. They are not prepared for a test. They're not sure how to advocate. So it's really important that when we're having these conversations, we're listing some of the typical things that might happen, and that they should see us immediately so that we can now adjust their accommodation letters, right? And as Kat mentioned, there's technology available. We do have sometimes faculty who might say no laptops allowed because they're concerned about students just wasting time on, you know, social media. But our students with accommodations are permitted to use their laptops. So we really try to make sure that the students know their rights, that they also understand they could lose their rights if they abuse it, right? If they're found to be on social media or other, then there are limitations on that. And recording, when they record a class, with that permission, they sign something stating how they will use the recording. So there are limitations around that. Sometimes faculty get they're not very comfortable with being recorded, but if the student has it as an accommodation and has signed that letter, which is carefully vetted, then they're permitted to record.
Right. And we tell students, we don't know something's not working for you unless you come tell us. So it is important for them to have that relationship with staff members in our office, because, you know, don't wait until the end of the semester to say, well, he wouldn't let me record because we can't do anything about it at that point. And so, you know, when you're working with your sons and daughters, you know, encourage them to go early on to come and contact us if things aren't going quite right. A lot of times they'll contact you, parents, and then you will contact us, and that's okay too. But you know, we really work with students, and unless students have signed a FERPA release, we really can't even give you specific information regarding them.
And that, just to add quickly to that, Kat, that's a good point. Parents are allowed to be on those meetings with the student, but I will always direct my questions to the student. And I really try to explain to parents that it's not out of disrespect, but we have to understand the student's experience in the classroom. And if they're not able to share that with us, we can't help them. So if the student invite the parent on a phone meeting, usually it's on the phone, it's not necessary to come in. Then we can have a robust conversation, but the parents can't describe for us what's happening with the child in the class and tell us what the professor said and all of these things that are probably happening, but probably not. And we have to remember too that we're working with students with impairments, so they might forget something or misquote something or misunderstand something. And we want to make sure we get everything right so that we can support the student and teach them how to advocate for themselves, even how to write that email, when to copy us, when, you know, to sort of expedite the process. So we really want to connect with the student.
I
Thank you.
would,
Such great points. Sorry, Dan.
that's correct. I would just add, picking up on one thing that Anna shared. So we, you know, in terms of our documentation, the best advice I can give to parents is if you have documentation, submit it. Submit what you have and let the university tell you if more documentation is needed. There are such varied documentation guidelines across institutions that the best thing you can do is submit the documentation. And if more information is needed, we'll tell you. The last thing I want you to do is feel like you have to get an updated psychoeducational evaluation or need updated testing when we don't need it and we wouldn't have asked you for it. And that's the case in a lot of the cases when, you know, there is this misnomer that it has to be X number of years old, and that's not always the case. So we're going to be really leaning into student self-report and what they can tell us about their disability impacts, and certainly that follow-up documentation may be helpful, but it isn't necessarily required. So definitely reach out to that school that you're looking at to see what advice they might have for you as well.
Thank you all. I know as a mother of two former college students, Kat, Denisha, your point about the students need to go, the students need to learn to self-advocate, and that we can be a part of it. But it's really, that was new learning for me, and it's challenging, but so very important. So thank you all. And I did have that other question about what do you do if a professor isn't providing the accommodations that you thought you had? So really to emphasize the students developing a relationship with you so that you can maybe inform the teacher or put some interventions in place, some accommodations in place, some adjustments in place early on is so important. Okay. I think another question I had is just about tutoring. Tutoring on college campuses seems like it's readily available, but I don't know if anyone would like to speak to that generally on the campus or through your programs.
I can start. We have tutoring available in our Center for Student Learning, and they are open from like 10 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. It is group tutoring, but they're good tutors. You know, you can't go there to get a whole lesson retaught to you. But you can visit your professor during office hours if you need one or two concepts to be reviewed. Also in the Center for Student Learning, they have academic coaching where they work on time management, study strategies, you know, developing your calendar to chunk some of those assignments like students may be more used to in high school. And put those things in a Google Calendar and get used to using that calendar to to set reminders for them so that, oh, I remember this is due in a week and I need to start on it now. So that's, we do have the Center for Student Learning that's available, and that is at no cost. And we also have a counseling center for students with specific mental health, or if they have, get into crisis while they're at college. It's difficult being away from home for that first time. And so those are two of the resources that we usually provide for students, as well as our academic success and retention office.
We have Think Tank, which provides free tutoring to all students. There is peer academic coaching. The university also offers 4 free sessions of professional coaching. In addition, we have the SALT Center. This is a fee-based program for students with attention and learning challenges.
And we have the Academic Resource Center at Iona as well. In fact, their office is right across from us, their department, and the students are able to get one-on-one tutoring with peers and professionals. We also have a system at Iona where faculty can put what's called a ticket in, an alert ticket about a student of concern, and that gets routed to any office that may have contact with that student. So it could be the Office of Student Success, it could be the tutoring center if they are assigned for tutoring, it could be our office if it's seen that they have accommodations. But typically it's the Office of Student Success, and that central office is the touch point with any issues, and they can usually reroute that ticket or that situation to the appropriate office. And that's helpful because faculty members, the instructors, are not allowed to determine whether a student has a disability, even though it might be quite obvious. Legally, they're not permitted to say to a student, hey, you need to go to the Accessibility Services office, unless the student says, unless they're struggling and the student identifies and say they had an IEP in high school. And that might be the trigger. But for the most part, faculty members, as much as they might be well-meaning and concerned, it is not their role to direct the student to our office. So that's something to think about, for students to think about. But yeah, the tutoring center is there. We work very closely in support of students. There are many students on our campus who are on the autism spectrum, and for them, that poses a unique challenge in terms of accessing support, socializing, participation in the classroom. We may need to make some adjustments for accommodations for them. If they get cold called on, they might not know what to say, even though they know the information. So those are some of the alternate accommodations that could be provided for students, and that requires some negotiation with the faculty member, and also to determine the format of the course and what they're assessing. So all of those things can be tweaked as the student progresses. So any adjustments are made on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
I would just, sorry, can I say one thing here, Kathy? So we partner with the Brunello Learning Center. It's our academic support wing of Miami University. And through the Brunello Learning Center, they offer peer-based group tutoring. If a student's disability prevents them from engaging fully in group-based settings, we may be able to provide individualized tutoring in certain situations. Additionally, there is academic coaching that's available one-on-one with a full-time professional Brunello Learning Center learning specialist, and all academic support programs and services are free at Miami.
Great, thank you. I don't know if the panel has anything that they'd like to add at this point, or we do have about 5 questions from the audience. So shall I move on to a question?
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
I know we focused on the documentation related to primarily learning disability, but I also wanted to touch on the fact that a student with mental health impairment or other medical conditions also qualify for accommodations. And for those, they definitely do need documentation. And we have our own form that we have their medical providers complete that provides some specific information for us to help the student, or at least determine what barriers they might experience. And also we have accommodations in the residence hall for some students as well. So that's also, that also requires that the student register for accommodations for that. And also those with food allergies are also accommodated.
Very comprehensive. Thank you. Denisha, what's the name of the fee-based program at Iona? It wasn't the Office of Student Success. That's
No,
available.
the fee-based program is called CAP, C-A-P, the Comprehensive Support Program, Comprehensive Assistance Program. We changed from Iona College to Iona University, and we had to change the name. So it's the Comprehensive Assistance Program. So if you type CAP in on our website, you will see all the information regarding what supports we offer in CAP.
Thank you. So the Office of Student Success is not a fee-based program.
No, it's an office that provides guidance. So let's say a student is absent or a student is struggling. It could be related to a disability and they have not applied for accommodations in our office. Maybe they thought they could do it on their own. Maybe they never heard of our office. But once that staff member engages with the student, they can ask those questions and now connect the student with our office. We would hope that that doesn't happen. The ideal situation is that they start this process from freshman year, because that is such a pivotal year and semester. It's so important. The student's self-esteem could be completely demoralized if they think they're not capable, and yet they are, if only they had requested accommodations. So we really want students to know that this is their right. And we try to explain to them that once we meet with you and once we've determined that legally you're a student who qualifies for this accommodation, the faculty member will not question it. They will come to us if there are questions. And it really helps students to see that this is something that they should really embrace, right? It's just like needing my glasses. I can't go anywhere without it. Their accommodations are very, very similar. There's so many students with anxiety, diagnosed anxiety, depression, and other that feel that they're not capable, and they are. They just need the accommodations to help them. So the Office of Student Success, we work very closely together for those students who might not know about our office or might be reluctant to come to see us.
Thank you for that clarification. I think your message earlier about starting early is so important too. So another question from the audience, if a student got a 504 plan late in high school, at the end of high school, so they didn't receive accommodations or services in high school, are they still eligible for accommodations in college?
Yeah, I can pick that one up. We have students that affiliate and apply for accommodations every single day of the entire year. So it is a never-ending door of students that are experiencing disability for the first time or decided they didn't want to apply initially when they chose to attend our university. All of those are valid and real experiences for students, and there is no prerequisite to having had accommodations before college in order to request accommodations.
And the only thing I would add to that is that accommodations for our institution is not retroactive. So
Right.
if you apply for it in the middle of the semester and you are at the point of failing before you came into us, we cannot say to a faculty member that the accommodations apply 3-4 weeks prior. It starts on the dates approved with our office, and it's up to the instructor if they want to be lenient and consider that. But we cannot say to a faculty member, this student has a disability and has been entitled to accommodation since the beginning of the semester, but they're now just identifying with our office.
Thank you. But there's nothing that says if a student didn't get accommodations in high school, they wouldn't get them in college.
Absolutely not.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not even a consideration with us.
No.
If they have appropriate documentation, a documentation from a provider regarding a mental health disability or, evaluation, maybe they didn't have, they might have, worked their way out of an IEP, but they still have those underlying strengths and weaknesses within their learning profile. We might consider, making some accommodations for that, because that still is how that student's profile is and where they're learning. And so we would look at addressing that. But there is no requirement that they have an IEP or a 504. And actually, we don't even look at, some high schools will change over an IEP to a 504 because they say that's what colleges will take. But we don't call them 504s in college. They're just, they're your accommodation plan through a professor notification letter. And so, we don't call them 504s. I guess they could be, but I don't know about other schools, but that's not what we do.
And we also have students who attended a private high school and may not have received accommodations, but they tell us, I have ADHD, right? And we talk about, okay, what medication are you taking? How long have you been taking it? How does it impact you? If the student is able to speak to that, the student qualifies for accommodation. They're taking medication, they're able to articulate how it impacts them. So in that case, we may not require documentation, right? We use the IEP just to look at the history of use of accommodations. But it's not what we use to determine what the accommodation should be. Typically, students get time and a half. In some setting, they might need double, but that's very rare. Most is time and a half. So yeah, it doesn't matter when they're diagnosed and whether or not they have been using accommodations previously.
Thank you. Another question, just kind of circle back to the application timeline and when do you reveal? So the question, a great one, how's my child going to get admitted to a school if they have struggled academically, right? Maybe a student has a learning disability and their grades aren't that great. So can you explain your struggle in school and reveal that you have a learning disability in your application?
Dan spoke a little bit to this earlier. You can reveal it, but I don't think it's a factor in the college application process. For a student in that particular case, you might recommend going to a community college first and get a good year under your belt, get good grades there, make sure that you can handle the rigor of college, because it is very different. And so, a lot of schools, especially after COVID, have done away with SAT scores. Many colleges just look solely at GPA activities, extracurricular activities and things like that. So, and what students are writing in their essays. And, I'm not on the admissions team, so I can't speak specifically to that. But, there are a lot of students with learning disabilities who are admitted to the college. And so, but that, like I said, you might consider, if you don't get into a college of your choice, maybe going to a smaller community college or something like that and getting those grades up and then transferring.
And I have to put on my high school counselor hat for a minute just to say that every college isn't looking for students to have, all A's or even all A's and B's, and that the application process, we talk about it being a bit of a portfolio, and students have an opportunity not only to write an essay, but also to get letters of recommendation. And it's common for students to get letters of recommendation in a class that they've really struggled. That teacher might, more than any other teacher, see how hard that child has worked, or that they really, they listen to what their classmates have said and build upon it, or they they always have their homework done, but they struggle on tests and quizzes. I mean, they could write a letter of recommendation that speaks to the student's ability to be successful without without necessarily earning an excellent grade. So I would encourage anyone who has questions about colleges to apply to or how to get into a school, if their grades aren't as good as they had hoped, to speak with their school counselor about strategies around that. And maybe to steal one of Denicia's points, the sooner the better, right? That we can support students better early on. All right. Another question, your school seems so wonderful at providing accommodations. As a parent, how would I know which college would be less willing and able to support my dyslexic child? Is there anything that they could, that should set off warning bells for a school that wouldn't be supportive, I guess?
Again, the student is entitled to the accommodation, right? So when a student is dyslexic, we're talking to the student about what that looks like for the student. And then the technology is provided. And we're also at our university looking perhaps at the curriculum. So it's the student who is reporting to us what their struggles are. It's not the university being resistant to supporting the student. It is really student driven. When you're a person with a disability, again, you're legally protected. You may, after that, you're looking at the size of the school, the measure, right? You want to make sure that whatever measure your child is pursuing aligns, or at least it's not going to create an additional barrier for their impairment, right? So you have to pick a reasonable measure, because not all of us can do everything we want to do. We all have limitations. So sometimes you have to look at the measure. But aside from that, it is the university or the college's responsibility to provide the accommodations for the student. We've worked very, very closely with various faculty in different departments to accommodate students. When you look at students who struggle in math, who struggle in some of the basic core courses, we have students who require JAWS or other technology to ensure that they have access to the course content. We have students who want to do dancing or other courses, and they might be impaired, right? Their mobility might not be the best, but the instructor now has to modify that course so that the student has access. So as long as they're not changing everything, fundamentally altering the course, they have an obligation to provide the accommodation that the student has been approved for, to work with the Accessibility Services Office, course by course by course, faculty by faculty by faculty. And our job is to educate the faculty. So it's not just working with students. I meet with chairs and department heads all the time. We have a health professionals program, and that was my fear. I was always terrified that our university is going to have health sciences, and here they come. So that is really tricky to accommodate. But we have been working with the chairs and the deans, and it's an educational process. And I think it's fantastic because our students teach our faculty what it means to be inclusive, and every year it gets better and better. And so I don't think there should be any fear, especially at this day and age, of a student entering an institution and not being accommodated. I should hope not. I think we're way past that, but it is about the student advocating and being clear about what they need, and us saying, well, that's not reasonable. We might say that's not a reasonable accommodation. That's a preference. So, it's a conversation.
Right. And in college, we look at providing accommodations to provide access, not necessarily success as it is in high school. And it might not be the preferred accommodation, but it is a reasonable accommodation. And so that, those are things to think about and talk with your children about as they go. It might not be your preferred accommodation, but it is one that provides you with access.
So warning bells would be a school, to your point, so many schools have wonderful student support services on their campus, and they're absolutely looking to provide students with an opportunity to access their education. So I guess a warning bell, if you found a school that didn't sound like they were offering that, run, right? But to your point, that would be hard to find.
Just one other thing, if you go to the open houses and the orientations, especially open houses, that department should be doing a presentation. So if you don't see your accessibility services team or a representative providing on information, then that would be definitely a red flag. And if you go on the website and it's not very clear, that also would be a red flag.
Thank you. Great points again. So maybe a couple minutes for a speed round. I don't see any more questions. I was just wondering if any of you, I think someone mentioned that you offer a transition to college program. Do you offer any summer programs or things like that for students to transition to college?
I can say that we offer a it's what we call a pre-semester program here at Miami. So it's called Miami Bound, Jumpstarting Disability Access at Miami. So that is for students that have connected with our team and our incoming first-year students in the fall. It is a 2-day program before move-in. So that is something that students can come early, move into campus, and then we have a 2-day intensive program because we know students have met with us before, they've gone through their access consultation, we went over all their accommodations, and by the time they come to their first week of class, they remember nothing. So we do need a jump start of how to request accommodations, how to have conversations with faculty, what are the academic support systems across campus. So all of that is available in a free program to students that can come early and really get to have an intensive overview with the access coordinator team about what it's like to use and request accommodations at Miami.
If we have a couple minutes, I don't know if you have information about the unique, maybe fee-based additional application programs like SALT at the University of Arizona or CAPS at Iona, or I believe, Kat, there is also a special program at College of Charleston. I don't know if you can talk about that, where people can get information about those programs that are not through your office.
Well, I mentioned the Center for Student Learning and the Counseling Center and the Academic Success and Retention Office. We don't, there is some transition for certain students to come, and I honestly, unfortunately, can't say how those students are identified. We do also have a Charleston Life program that is, it's not a on a track for a degree, but it is a certificate for students with intellectual and some other limited disabilities. And that is, they take 10 students a year in their cohort. And so we also have that program, and we work closely with those students and that program to offer accommodations for access. I don't know if that's what you were asking me though, Kathy.
That's exactly what I was asking about. Thank you. Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, and I can share more information regarding the SALT Center. That is a fee-based program. If you're interested in finding more information, you can visit their website at salt.arizona.edu. To my understanding, this is a program where students are matched with a learning specialist that would provide one-on-one support for academic success. So it's different from exploring reasonable accommodations, but it is an additional support available to our students.
CAP is a fee-based program that offers support above and beyond what is legally required. So what we've been talking about so far, most of the accommodations are required at no cost, right? Or available at no cost, rather. What CAP provides is one-on-one support for students who might need additional support, might find it more challenging to navigate the campus environment. But they must have primarily a learning disability. They may have some other impairments, but the primary diagnosis must be learning disability, and they must be fairly independent. So we're not a comprehensive support program that supports emotionally, socially, even though we can connect students to those support services. They still have to navigate the campus. They still have to be able to go to their classes, collect information, take notes in one form or the other, and bring it to their learning specialist so they can make a plan. But the learning specialists have copies of all their syllabi, they have grade sheets, they're doing check-ins, to-do lists, so the organization is there. We have a transition support specialist who helps the student to adjust to college. They talk about stress management, what's happening in the residence hall, what's happening at home, maybe they miss home, all those issues that might come up, right? That might derail their academics. We also have peer mentors in the program, and they're all CAP students. Some of them, we had their graduation party today. It was really amazing. So, and they connect with the students. They might take them to a basketball game. They might take them to the movies. They might accompany them for lunch just to help them adjust. We also have workshops and study groups, and all of our learning specialists are professionals. They all have master's degrees, some have PhDs, but it really is an environment where we're sort of keeping tabs on the student, but the student has to work with us, right? If they're not able to meet us halfway, then we're not able to help them. The good thing about being part of CAP is that when a professor gets a letter that the student is also part of CAP, we're able to get some additional information about the student's progress. But we're still having the student advocate. We're not taking over for the student, and we're not communicating with the parents. We are working with the student. But they have a little bit more hand-holding along the way, and they don't necessarily need CAP for the entire time. And we're hoping not. Our goal is to have them for a year or two. Most of them stay longer because they like the help with registering and deciding on a major, and they have their little preferences, right? And they get so familiar and comfortable, and we have a great space for them. So we work at meeting the students where they are. We implement something new every year, even though we say we're going to stop. But one of the things we find is that students are not quite sure how to take advantage of an office hour. What does that mean, right? They used to go into resource room. Now they have to have a conversation with a faculty member, and they're very intimidated and they don't know what to ask. And they'll tell the learning specialist, they write the email and they just don't. So we have the learning specialists have accompanied them on Zoom for at least one meeting to get a sense of the course requirements and what could be some of the barriers. One of the new barriers we're experiencing is the AI. AI has triggered some responses from faculty who want to make sure the students are actually doing their work. So we find that there are a lot of assessments are being done in the classroom, which can be a distraction for students. So we understand the goal of the faculty is to make sure that the student is understanding and learning, but within the context of sitting in the classroom and having to produce work that might be graded, that could be a lot of pressure. So I often say CAP students are the ones who tell us first what's going on with the other students in the classroom with accommodations, because we hear the stories first. And so it's a great program. It's not for all students. Students who want to be a little bit more independent don't need CAP, but the ones that really do, it does benefit them.
Thank you, Denisha. I don't know if you can see the comments. Someone said that was great. Thanks. Also specific to that program, you had mentioned that it's for students with learning disabilities, but if someone had an autism diagnosis, would that automatically rule them out, or you're open to consider different profiles of learners?
We have students who are on the autism spectrum. What we run into, to be honest, is those who have not had enough social skills training, so they're not able to adjust to the college setting. They will struggle with perhaps classroom behavior. If they've had a lot of support in high school, they may have had a one-on-one setting. that is going to be a disruption for them when they get to college. So we work with families. We say maybe if they can commute the first year where they have the connection with their parents. So it depends. We have a number of students on the spectrum, but the spectrum is broad. And some of our most brilliant students are students who are on the autism spectrum. So, and we, as I said, we have a neurodiversity club, and that was started by a CAP student. So, and we have CAP students who are in the honors program, who are in the science nursing program. So it varies, but yes, we welcome students who are neurodivergent in our program.
Okay, thank you. I think that we asked you guys to stay till 8:15. I have maybe just 2 more questions to ask quickly before we wrap up tonight. Dan, someone was asking if Miami has a similar program to CAPS.
We do not have any fee-based programs that are individualized to students. All students with disabilities engage in our standard programs via our academic support structures. Certainly they can be tailored. For example, our academic coaching program can meet with students on a weekly basis, provide a higher level of support, but we really are creating that network of care around a student and connecting them, whether it's in the residence hall, whether it's with our team, academic support, student success on campus, academic advisors, really all the different pieces being brought together, but we don't have a dedicated program specifically for that.
The last question was about any surprising or unusually helpful accommodations for students with ADD going on to college.
That's a tough one, and that's where the student report and them really knowing themselves and being able to articulate what their particular barriers are is going to be very important, because that's how we listen. We listen for those things and think of things based on what the student is telling us their barriers are. So, it's not, I've told parents in meetings, it's not a Chinese menu. They don't say, well, what accommodations do you offer? Well, it really totally is based on your child's barriers and how their disability impacts them. And so that's, that's why they need to be, again, I hate to keep harping on it, but, self-advocates for themselves to be able to articulate that.
Yeah, it's such a great point, and we talk about that all the time here with students to really develop their self-advocacy skills. So I don't think you can harp on it too much.
Can I ask you to repeat the question?
They were just asking about a unique accommodation for students with ADHD.
I don't know if there's an accommodation per se, because as Kat mentions, ADHD impacts students in different ways. It could impact them in the residence hall. Socially, they might tend to be risk takers. It depends. But if they're what we often come across are students who might not be using medication, and they haven't figured out what works for them. So they have to remember that in the classroom setting, faculty is looking for them to be paying attention. So they're not going to be as flexible as high school. So if they're on their phones, put the phones away and pay attention. Find a way to pay attention and not sit near the window if the window is, and in the back of the classroom if those things distract them. But their accommodation is secondary to how do I pay attention in the classroom? How do I get what I need from this lecture so that I can study and be prepared? So I think that would be the greatest challenge for a child with ADHD. And also when they get to campus, secure their medication. That's also very, very important.
All right, well, thank you all so very much. And again, I would like to thank the Darien SEPAC, the Darien Library, and my colleagues at Darien Public Schools for sponsoring the event. And the panel, you guys are so generous with your time and your knowledge. We really appreciate your insight tonight. And I want to thank everyone who joined us to learn more about college support services.
And Cathy, thanks. And I just wanted to add also that for people who might not have been on in the beginning, we'll be sending out the recording of tonight and on our SEPAC blast. So if anybody is not on there, they can email us at dariencpac@gmail.com, and we can add you to the list. And yes, we wanted to thank everyone, Samantha and Cathy and all of you, Anna and Kat and Denisha and Dan, for all your time tonight. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Good night.
Night.